That's a pretty interesting game, actually.
Big game.
Yeah. That division's always been weird. Just weird. Senior NFL reporter, Monday Morning Quarterback. We bring him on, try to every week. He's got all sorts of insights. Albert Breer is now joining us live. You know, I said this to start our show today. When Brady left New England, I was shocked. Now, a lot of you guys that are on the inside weren't. The house was for sale, all that stuff. But I think a lot of us were like, Tom's a system guy. He loves it. It's very much about, the grind, and he's a grind guy. And I look at Bill Belichick, and as much as he's great, Pete Carroll was fired twice when he couldn't get a quarterback. Couldn't win in Seattle pre-Russell Wilson. Belichick's won 43% of his games. And I don't see a solution, Albert, at quarterback. They're not going to run back Cam. They're now out of the running for the top 3 quarterbacks and probably Zach Wilson at BYU if you look at their draft spot today, and they're going to beat the Jets again. And I say to myself, Jacksonville would give him everything. They'd give Bill the GM. They'd give him the coach. Old guys like to go to Florida.
Yeah.
The Chargers, by the way. Chargers, Albert, cannot sell tickets in L.A. You got LeBron, Kawhi, the Rams, USC, and I think you can't win in this league if you don't have the right quarterback. Even Belichick can't. And I think to myself, what's the solution, Albert, this morning at quarterback for New England? I don't see it.
I don't know. Like right now, I think you have to give it a go with Cam over the next 7 weeks, see what happens. I think they very much are going to give him the chance to hold on to that job. We'll see what happens. Obviously, they've had to change their system quite a bit. But you're right. There's a lot of uncertainty past that. They obviously don't have him signed past this year. I think we would have seen more of Jarrett Stidham by now if they really had any sort of belief left in him. And so then you look out at the veteran market. Maybe somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo comes available. Maybe they look at Jacoby Brissett, who's going to be a free agent out of Indianapolis, has background in their system as somebody who could be a bridge option for them. But other than that, I mean, you really are looking at the draft. And the one thing that is, I think, nice for some teams about the draft now, I think coming into the year, this was like a 2+1 draft class, right? Like at that position, it was Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and maybe Trey Lance. Now I think you've got maybe as many as 6 quarterbacks that could go in the top 50 picks. Those 3 guys, Zach Wilson from BYU, like you mentioned, Kyle Trask from Florida, Mac Jones from Alabama, all could be first or second round picks. And so I think right now they've got to just sort of keep their options open. I know I was an advocate for signing Cam to maybe a 3 or a 4 year deal. And I still don't think that that's off the table if he starts to play better. But you're right. The future is very uncertain at that position for them. And without the quarterback in the NFL, like you said, you're nowhere.
You know, it's interesting. I noticed this. I didn't think it was a coincidence. When LeBron arrived for the Lakers, suddenly the Clippers went out and got 2 stars. The Rams started signing big free agents. The Dodgers finally spent big money, mookie bets. It's like, okay, it's a competitive, distracted, deep sports market in L.A. LeBron moves in. You want to get in the L.A. Times? You want to get on talk radio? You got to go get stars. And so I look at New York, and how do you catch up if you're the Nets to the Knicks? Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. And I look at the Jets. They're dead in New York. How do you catch up to the Giants? Trevor Lawrence. Yeah. I think some of this, Albert, feels like a business move, and Joe Douglas, the GM's, not going to have much of a say. Like, is that crazy?
Well, it would be. I think it would be valid if Trevor Lawrence wasn't this otherworldly prospect. And I think I've said this to you before, and I think sometimes people get this part mixed up, right? Like, this isn't we talk about somebody this way every year kind of guy. This is John Elway, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence. This is a once-in-a-decade type of prospect. And so I think there's that. There's that, of course. It's a huge factor here. The other thing, Colin, is are you sure about Sam Darnold? Because you're going to have to make a $25 to $30 million decision on him in May if you are going forward with him as the quarterback, and you'd be locking yourself into him for the next 2 years. And so I think from a football standpoint, it would make all the sense in the world. I think it'd almost be malpractice not to take Trevor Lawrence. But you are right. Like, it would help on the marquee having Trevor Lawrence to sell yourself in New York. And by the way, if they are going to be looking for a new coach, which seems like a distinct possibility right now, they're going to be competing with some franchises that aren't complete dumpster fires. Like, I don't view Atlanta as that bad a franchise. I don't view Houston as that bad a franchise. And so if they're in competition for some coaching candidates, what better lure would there be out there than having a 21-year-old kid like Trevor Lawrence to build around?
So I watched Kyler against Tua. I said it was probably the most entertaining football game I've seen so far. You've got a lot of sources around the league. Kyler's officially a hit. It works. There's no arguing now.
Yep.
Kyler works in the NFL. Herbert, Burrow, it's working. Tua was the one where, like, I don't know. But I tell you what, if you look at the history of the NFL, Albert, quarterbacks that are good with defensive coaches win a lot of these Super Bowls. And I looked at Flores and Tua. I got to be honest with you. What are you hearing around the league? Because I watched that and I thought, boy, this is interesting.
It's really interesting you bring that up, Colin, because if you look at Russell Wilson in Seattle and you look at Tom Brady in New England, playing for defensive coaches, right? What's the thing they have in common? When they were young in their careers, those teams were built where those guys didn't have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They didn't have to throw for 1,000,000 yards because those teams were built a different way. What does it look like Tua has in Miami? Like, they don't need him to throw for 300 yards every week. In fact, his first start, the defense scored a touchdown, set up another one, and they scored a touchdown on special teams. And so I think some of the sensibilities of defensive coaches lead them to build teams that way. And that can actually help your young quarterback more than having a great receiver or a great tight end for them to throw to, just because mentally they go into the game knowing, I just got to do my job and we're going to be okay. So I think that that's a part of it. And as for Tua specifically, I was talking to a couple Dolphins staffers on Sunday night, and I think there were some interesting things that came from those conversations. Number one, they really liked how he adjusted on the fly. They lost a tight end, Durham Smythe, and a receiver, Preston Williams, in game. They really, really liked the way that he adjusted as things went on and was able to kind of roll with the punches there. And one of the guys that I talked to just kind of put it this way to me on how he performed down the stretch. Came down to 3 words. He's a winner. They already see that just half a season into his NFL career.
Yeah, well, that's what Saban said. He's a winner. Not ideal size, not a huge arm, not the cagiest runner. He's a winner. So, you look at – I saw a story the other day. It may have been by Ben Volen. He said, Brady – I thought the Tampa offensive game plan was weird. So Tom generally likes he likes to get his completions in. He likes to get into a little bit of a rhythm. Then he can go over the top. Tampa came in and just low percentage deep throws. And I was like, this is just not Tom. And listen, Arians called him out a little. And Ben Volen's article says, is there a power struggle? What do you make when you watch that performance? It's beyond losing. It feels like, are there disconnecting points here, Arian style, Tom style at all?
I think there were probably a couple things that worked. I actually was encouraged with what we had seen over the weeks previous to this one. So, I don't want to make sweeping conclusions based on what was a really, really bad Sunday night for them against the Saints. In fact, I think we saw some things that were encouraging just as far as Brady's willingness to go down the field. Obviously, Bruce Arians' offense has always been conducive to that sort of thing. So we saw that. I think one thing that's interesting about this one, though, is what happens when you're playing from behind, right? Like, Brady's always liked to sort of spread the ball around. He's like to have control of things. He isn't the type of quarterback who's going to try and get everything back in one throw. And I think playing from behind can kind of stress coaches and quarterbacks in different ways. And so, I think now this kind of puts them at an interesting crossroads because now they've seen it. What happens when things go awry? They've got to decide who they are in those spots. And so I think that that's where you saw a little bit of that disconnect. Whereas when you're up by 3 touchdowns, it's easy to go down the field, right? Like, hey, let's try this and see if it works. If it doesn't, no big deal. It's a lot different when you're playing from behind. And so you would hope at least that now guys like Tom Brady, Clyde Christensen, Tom Moore, and Bruce Arians can go back and look at that and say, we really got to figure out who we want to be in those sorts of spots because it wasn't working on Sunday night.
Yeah. Okay, if we all acknowledge Kansas City's the best team in the league, A quarterback, A coach, I think their defense is playing at an A level, A weapons. Who is your second best team in the NFL this morning?
I still think it's Pittsburgh. I put Pittsburgh number 1 in my power rankings because they're undefeated. But I still think it would probably be the Steelers just because they're more complete than they have been. And I do think there's a ceiling there. I think that there's they've got a ways to go before they're really hitting on full throttle. And one of the reasons why I still think there's another gear they can hit with those young receivers. And it looks like they've got 3 really good ones.
Yeah.
Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, and obviously the rookie Chase Claypool. And so really good defense. It looks like they've got the defense fixed. The running game's working. And now I think there's even another level that they can reach with those 3 young receivers. They haven't gotten there yet, but I do think that there's the room to grow there where they can grow a little bit more. And I think when it comes to kind of ranking these teams and stacking them and competing for championships, it's about who has the least flaws. And I look at the Steelers roster, and I just don't see a whole lot of holes. Devin Bush might have created one at linebacker, but Vince Williams is a really good player in there for him, and they were able to trade for Avery Williams. And so I think they're the second most complete team and the second best team in the league behind the Chiefs.
Albert Breer, good talking to you as always. Monday Morning Quarterback. Thanks, man.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Colin.
You know, we were talking about the Jets and Trevor Lawrence, and his point is, listen, when you get an Elway or an Andrew Luck, like Peyton Manning, like just at some point, if you're a general manager, I said this with LeBron, and I feel like this, and this happens maybe once a decade in the NBA and once or twice a decade in the NFL. If you're a general manager, you draft a guy to protect your legacy. Like